Welcome back to F1 Blogs, everyone. Today we're doing something a little different. We're going under the hood, so to speak,
Yeah.
of Red Bull's championship-winning RB20.
Think of it as a deep dive into the DNA of a champion, uncovering the engineering secrets, the design choices, even some of the quirks that made this car so special.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about how a car evolves over a season, right? I mean, we see the upgrades on track every race weekend, but we rarely get to see the why behind them. Why this change? Why now?
And that's exactly what we are going to do today. We'll trace the RB20's journey from its initial concept to its final form, exploring the thinking behind each modification and its impact on performance.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Adrian Newey's final creation for Red Bull before we step back, and it's definitely got his fingerprints all over it. But what's really interesting is how this car took inspiration from some unexpected sources.
Absolutely. For example, the Great Wall engine cover design. That was actually a concept Mercedes tried in 2023. Didn't quite work out for them, but Red Bull clearly saw its potential.
It's almost like they looked at Mercedes' struggles and thought, hold on, we can make this work. You know, they refined the concept, turned it into a key part of the RB20's aerodynamics. I mean, it's a pretty dramatic design element, isn't it? It really stood out on track.
It did, and it highlights a crucial aspect of Formula One design: competitive copying. Teams are constantly analyzing each other's cars, looking for ideas they can adapt and improve upon. It's a constant game of one-upmanship.
It's like a high-stakes fashion show where everyone's borrowing from each other's collections. And speaking of borrowing, weren't those side pods on the RB20 inspired by Ferrari's design from the previous year?
You've got a sharp eye. Yes, Red Bull adapted those vertical slits on the side pods from Ferrari's 2023 car. It's a perfect example how teams aren't afraid to take inspiration from their rivals if they think it'll give them an edge.
So it's not just about being the first to come up with an idea. It's about being the best at refining and implementing it.
Exactly. And when it comes to refinement, the RB20 is a masterclass. The amount of detail that went into this car, astonishing. Take the cooling solutions, for example. It's like they built a labyrinth of inlets and outlets to keep everything running at the optimal temperature.
You're right. It's like they designed a custom AC system just for the engine. There were vents everywhere, around the driver's head, under the floor, even near the suspension points.
Yeah.
Why so many? Was it just about keeping the Honda power unit cool?
Well, that was a major factor, of course. The Honda engine, incredibly powerful, but also generated a lot of heat. But it wasn't just about the engine. They needed to manage the temperatures of the gearbox, the brakes, the electronics, everything. These systems are all interconnected, and even a small temperature fluctuation in one area can have a ripple effect throughout the car.
It's amazing to think about the level of precision involved. And speaking of precision, remember what happened in Australia? Verstappen's brake failure.
Oh, yeah.
Dramatic. The whole system just exploded. Do you think that was connected to these cooling challenges?
It's certainly possible. Managing heat within a Formula One car is a constant battle. Even a small miscalculation or a blockage in one of those cooling vents could have catastrophic consequences. Remember, these cars are operating at extreme temperatures and under immense stress.
Absolutely. So we've got this incredibly complex car, a symphony of meticulously engineered parts, all working in harmony. And then, midway through the season, Red Bull decides to make a radical change. Remember the Hungarian Grand Prix when that Great Wall section just vanished? It was like they'd taken a chainsaw to the back of the car.
It was a dramatic shift, that's for sure, and it sparked a lot of debate in the paddock. Was it a pre-planned evolution, or was it a desperate attempt to fix a fundamental flaw with the initial design?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It was like watching an artist suddenly decide to slash their masterpiece in half. And remember how those early season cooling vents on the Great Wall were gradually closed off? It seemed like they were constantly experimenting, tweaking things, trying to find that perfect balance.
That's the hallmark of a top team. They're never satisfied,
Yeah.
always looking for ways to improve, even if it means abandoning a design element that was initially considered a stroke of genius.
So we've talked about the Great Wall, we've talked about the cooling solutions, but there are a lot of other changes throughout the season too. Changes that at first glance seemed relatively minor, like those little tweaks they made to the wing mirrors.
Ah, those mirrors.
Yeah.
They might seem insignificant compared to the Great Wall or the side pods, but they play a crucial role in directing airflow over the car. Remember that little bridge section they added early in the season, connecting the mirror to the chassis? And then they completely redesigned that support structure later on, going for a simpler linkage. Each iteration was about finding that perfect balance between aerodynamic efficiency and structural integrity.
Right. I remember those tiny adjustments. And then there was that rear wing they used at Monza, the one with the huge cutout. It was almost as if they'd taken a pair of scissors to it. Did that design actually work?
It was a bold experiment, let's put it that way. The idea was to reduce drag on the straights, but it didn't quite deliver the desired results. Even Verstappen wasn't entirely convinced by it. It just goes to show that even the most brilliant engineers sometimes make miscalculations.
It's like they were trying to push the boundaries of what's possible, but sometimes you go a little too far, right?
Exactly. And that's the beauty of Formula One. It's a constant battle between innovation and practicality, between pushing the limits and staying within the rules.
And even the nose of the car went through a subtle evolution, starting out quite blunt, then becoming more pointed as the season progressed. It's incredible how much thought goes into every single element of these cars.
Aerodynamic refinement is a never-ending quest in Formula One. Even the smallest changes can add up to significant performance gains, especially when you're competing against teams like Ferrari and McLaren who are breathing down Red Bull's neck all season.
You mentioned Ferrari and McLaren. That's a good segue into our next discussion point, the driver. Specifically, Sergio Perez's struggles to adapt to the RB20.
Ah, yes. Check.
Yeah. It was a stark contrast to Verstappen's dominance, wasn't it? Perez is a talented driver, no doubt, but he really seemed to struggle to get comfortable with the car.
He even commented later in the season that Verstappen was finally experiencing the same difficult characteristics that he'd been battling all year. It makes you wonder.
If the car was almost designed around Verstappen's driving style.
Exactly. And if that's the case, what does it mean for Red Bull's future? Especially now that Adrian Newey has taken a step back from design.
That's a question we'll explore in more detail in the next part of our deep dive.
So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Red Bull RB20.
Before the break, we were talking about Sergio Perez's struggles to adapt to the car. It seemed like Verstappen was extracting so much more performance from it.
And that raises a fascinating question. Was the RB20 designed with Verstappen's driving style in mind?
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time a team has built a car tailored to a specific driver. Right. Think back to Senna and Prost, Schumacher and Ferrari. Certain driver car combinations just seem to click.
But if the RB20 was truly a Verstappen special, what does that mean for Perez and for Red Bull's future driver lineup?
It's a tricky situation for a team. On the one hand, you want to give your star driver the best possible car.
Especially when that star driver is winning championships.
Exactly. But on the other hand, you need a second driver who can consistently score points and support the team's overall strategy.
And that's where Perez seemed to fall short. He had some great moments, of course, but his performance was too inconsistent compared to Verstappen's.
And those inconsistencies started to become more pronounced as the season went on, particularly when McLaren and Ferrari started closing the performance gap.
It's almost as if Red Bull's focus shifted towards 2025 and the new regulations, which might explain why they weren't able to fully address Perez's difficulties with the RB20.
That's a common dilemma for Formula One teams. Do you push development to the limit for the current season, or do you start thinking about next year's car?
Especially when you're already winning. It's like trying to juggle a championship trophy and a toolbox at the same time.
And with Adrian Newey stepping back from his role as Chief Technical Officer, Red Bull is entering a new era. Will they continue this philosophy of tailoring the car to their lead driver? Or will they try to build a more balanced car that suits a wider range of driving styles?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the answer might depend on who Red Bull chooses as their second driver alongside Verstappen.
Absolutely. If they go for a young, up-and-coming driver, they might be more inclined to mold the car around Verstappen's preferences.
But if they opt for a more experienced driver, someone like Fernando Alonso or Daniel Ricciardo, they might need to adopt a more collaborative approach to car development.
It's a fascinating strategic decision that could have a major impact on Red Bull's future success.
So the RB20 is more than just a championship-winning car. It's a symbol of Red Bull's dominance, their innovative design philosophy, and perhaps their unwavering faith in Max Verstappen.
But it also raises questions about their approach to driver management and their ability to adapt to a changing Formula One landscape.
We've covered a lot of ground today. from the evolution of the Great Wall to the challenges faced by Sergio Perez. But there's one more aspect of the RB20 that we haven't touched on yet.
Oh, and what's that?
The financial side of things. Remember, Formula One now operates under a cost cap.
Ah, yes. The budget constraints that have thrown a wrench into every team's plans.
Exactly. So how did the cost cap impact the development of the RB20? And how might it influence Red Bull's design choices for 2025 and beyond? That's what we'll be exploring in the final part of our deep dive.
Sounds intriguing. I'm eager to delve into those financial complexities.
Stay tuned, folks, because we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back to F1 Blogs. We're wrapping up our deep dive into the Red Bull RB20, and for this last segment, we're shifting gears a bit.
Ah, yes. From aerodynamics and engine cooling to the world of spreadsheets and budget caps.
Precisely. We've talked about the RB20's design evolution, its strength, its quirks, and even Sergio Perez's struggles to adapt to it. But we haven't really addressed the elephant in the room, the cost cap.
It's the invisible force shaping every decision in Formula One these days. No team, not even a championship-winning powerhouse like Red Bull, is immune to its influence.
Right, it's like having a brilliant chef who's suddenly limited to using only a handful of ingredients. They can still create a masterpiece, but they have to be incredibly resourceful.
Exactly. And that resourcefulness was on full display throughout the RB20's development. Think about those seemingly minor changes we discussed earlier. The tweaks to the wing mirrors, the evolution of the nose, even that experimental rear wing at Monza. Each of those modifications had to be carefully considered, not just for its performance impact, but also for its cost.
So it's not just about finding the fastest solution anymore, it's about finding the most cost-effective one.
Precisely. And that requires a whole new level of strategic thinking. Teams have to prioritize their development efforts, focusing on areas where they can get the most bang for their buck.
Which makes you wonder if some of the RB20's weaknesses, particularly the ones that Perez struggled with, were a direct result of the cost cap.
It's certainly a possibility. Perhaps they simply didn't have the budget to fully address those issues while also pushing development in other areas. Or maybe they had to compromise on certain design choices to stay within the spending limits.
It's like a game of chess, isn't it? Every move has consequences, both on the track and on the balance sheet.
Absolutely. And the stakes are incredibly high. Exceed the cost cap and you face severe penalties, potentially even disqualification from the championship.
Which brings us to another intriguing question. How will the cost cap influence Red Bull's design philosophy going forward? Will they continue to push the boundaries of innovation, even if it means stretching their budget to the limit?
That's the dilemma facing every team right now. The 2026 regulations are looming, and they represent a significant shift in the technological landscape of Formula One.
New engines, new aerodynamic rules. It's a clean slate for everyone, but also a massive financial challenge.
Exactly. Teams will need to invest heavily in research and development to stay competitive, all while operating under the constraints of the cost cap. It's a balancing act that will require meticulous planning and ruthless prioritization.
So the RB20 might be Adrian Newey's final masterpiece for Red Bull, but it also marks the beginning of a new chapter for the team, a chapter defined by financial constraints, technological upheaval, and the constant pressure to stay ahead of the curve.
It will be fascinating to see how Red Bull navigates these challenges. Will they continue to dominate as they have for much of the past decade? Or will the cost cap and the new regulations level the playing field, creating opportunities for their rivals to catch up?
Only time will tell. But one thing is for sure. The future of Formula One is more unpredictable than ever. And that, in my opinion, is what makes it so exciting.
I completely agree. The combination of technological innovation, strategic decision-making, and raw human talent is what sets Formula One apart from any other sport. And the RB20, for all its triumphs and its flaws, is a perfect embodiment of that.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Red Bull RB20. We hope you enjoyed this journey beneath the surface of Formula One. If you did, please hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. It really helps us reach more Formula One enthusiasts like you. And make sure to join us next time when we'll be dissecting another fascinating aspect of the 2024 Formula One season. Until then, keep those engines revving.